I want to go through the history briefly to talk about how we got to where we are. This is our 5th meeting in a series. These meetings are part of a larger initiative to close the racial wealth gap and to include people of color in asset-making policy, which includes webinars, some publications, a listserv, and some other things. When we started 5 years ago, it was because Kilolo came to us and asked us to help her put together a program to increase the influence of people of color in asset-making policy. I think she was tired of being the only one in the room. So we had our first meeting in 2004 in Tuskegee, and there were only 17 people. A principal outcome of that was to decide and to choose additional people that we thought should be in the room to help us work on this issue. We also spent some time just trying to get to know each other. In every step of the way, we've tried to make our group very diverse in terms of race, ethnicity, and different subject areas. So we met again the next year, also in Tuskegee, and we had about 65 people. And it was just as diverse, and actually probably more so. And obviously it was larger, and we spent a lot more time in our panels and stuff trying to get to understand each other and what our various issues were and are, and also trying to figure out what we have in common so that we could work together. The third meeting, Melvin Oliver hosted us in Santa Barbara. And in preparation for the third meeting, we raised the question of ourselves of what kind of policies do we want to affect? And that's when we picked closing the racial wealth gap as the policy that we want to affect. It's pretty broad. I guess that's really lots of policies. But we needed to know exactly why we were doing this. And so that was the first meeting where that became what this is about. The goals that we have for that meeting were identifying the highest priority issues to work on, determining what is unique and advantageous about involving people of color in policymaking discussions. We talked about developing a message so that the broader community could understand what we were talking about. And we talked about trying to build on what we had and build a cohesive constituency. A major outcome of that meeting was that we set up 7 working groups to work in various areas. Our experts are experts. You guys are experts in a substantive area. We're just not experts on race. We are experts on a substantive area who happen to be people of color and who have chosen, as part of our professional life, to work on this racial gap issue. The most satisfying thing about this initiative to me is that we've had such a diverse group of people that have found things in common to work on and have worked well together over the last 4 or 5 years, continue to work together. And as we bring more people into the fold, they fit right in, they understand the agenda, and this is the most diverse group I've ever worked with at this size that continues to work really, really well together. We've learned what's common, and we seem to have found among our differences those things that are common, so we move forward together. So I want to thank all of you for that. This is the most fun thing I get to work on, even though it's a very serious problem. So what I'd like to do now is to bring up Kilolo Kijakazi. This started with Kilolo's idea. She's very, very much involved. She is a partner and a participant and not just a funder in Kilolo.
Thank you. It's good to see you here. And it is good to be back in D.C. I lived here for a long time before going to New York about 6 years ago. Took some getting used to being in New York, but one of the things that I like about that city is that some of everybody comes through there. And Saturday night, I went to a concert on Broadway, and it was featuring a group called Black Violin. And I don't know if any of you are familiar. They're these young brothers out of Florida. And they played classical, they played R&B, pop, rock, and hip hop. They played Shostakovich, Bach, Temptations, Jay-Z, and then they improvised in the best jazz method. And when the brothers said, every time we hit the stage, we break down stereotypes. And I thought of this organization, this network, because that's exactly how I see us. The very presence of this network faces down the myth that there are not enough knowledgeable people of color to participate in some of the most important decisions that are being made about the lives of our people. Right now, in the midst of this economic crisis, those who have had great wealth have lost it, many of them. Those who have never had much wealth at all are falling farther behind. It is important for policymakers to get to know all of you and to call on you in the future. We have invited, as Roger said, a smaller subset of the network for this meeting so that we can really focus on policy and on communications. Roger Clay, Meizhu Louis, Maya Rocky Moore, Alan Jenkins, Ludovic Blaine, Victor Corral, Marcia Caldwell, and Robin Leeds and others have done a tremendous job in putting together this convening. Of all the work that I have engaged in since I've been at the Ford Foundation over the last 6 years, this is the work of which I am most proud. You know, when my daughter was little, and she's over here knitting, and I would read her stories, she would look at the pictures and say, "Where am I, Mommy? Where am I in the picture?" And I would point and say, "There you are, that little black girl right there, that's you." And I think that our work is about helping policymakers see where we are in the picture. We need to let them know the stories of our communities and help them to understand where we fit in, how policy affects us, and how the story needs to be written in order for all of us to move forward. How policy needs to be inclusive of our communities as well as those of higher wealth and white communities. And we also need to help them write this story so that it produces a happy ending, which eliminates racial and ethnic economic gaps. And for you and for me, that's the challenge and the opportunity. Thank you.
Start with introducing a few key people. You're all important, but when you get down to the bottom of it, we know that this is not about issues, it's about people. So I wanted to really thank our leadership committee and introduce them to you. First of all, of course, there is Melvin Oliver. Can you stand? I think you all know who he is. But Melvin is really the granddaddy of all of us, and I don't mean in age. But if it wasn't for his groundbreaking work that showed that wealth is the key to understanding racial economic disparity, we wouldn't be here today. Rebecca Adamson. Rebecca? She's the founder and first executive director of First Nations Development Institute and now First Peoples Worldwide. She's a visionary who makes her visions happen. So we all know that when other people make decisions for us and control our resources, that it's not going to work out too well. She has convinced people with money and power to give her the money and the power because she and the people that she works with, our community people, are the ones who know best how to make those investments really work. Linda Chavez Thompson. Want to stand, Linda? She's the Executive Vice President Emerita of the AFL-CIO, the first person of color and a woman of color to be elected into one of those highest offices of the Federation of Labor. So we really appreciate her groundbreaking work. Puanani Burgess. In all of our communities, We love and respect our, as they say in Hawaii, our aunties, our kupuna, but it is strong women elders in almost all our communities of color who hold our histories and our stories in their hearts and in their hands. They're the ones we go to as our touchstones when we want to make sure that we are going to be true to our community roots. And there are two people who couldn't make it today, Bill Lon Lee, who was the top civil rights prosecutor as Assistant Attorney General in the U.S. Department of Justice in the Clinton administration, and worked for many years as in the legal department of the NAACP, a Chinese American who understood that all of the fates of people of color are closely related together. And Julianne Malveaux, who is the president of Bennett College for Women, and she has really carried our message out there for some time. Her sharp-witted commentary on race, wealth, and inequality have really helped move us forward. So thank you to all of them for being with us, and you will hear from all of the leaders that are in the room later today. Now, we don't have a full-fledged policy agenda. We have not done that kind of work, and the issues are quite complex. But we have distilled from the work you've done over the last number of convenings and in your working group and in your research, 7 principles which are in your packet, and we would, of course, appreciate feedback on those. But the first is that we need asset-building policies. We know that it isn't just hard work that allows people to get ahead and to reach economic security. We need asset-building policies, as has been enacted over many years for white families in this country. We need those for people of color as well. And second, that while we really want to lift up all those who are poor, it is a shame that in this country we still have one person out of every 8 that lives below the federal poverty line, which we know is set way too low. But that we also have to pay special attention to those who have been excluded. We have to be intentional about closing the race gap. It's not going to happen there's no invisible hand that's going to make that happen, or simply by lifting all poor, we're not going to close the racial wealth gap. The third is that closing the gap requires the expertise of the people who know the gap the best. And that's not just the experts in this room, but the people who live in our communities are experts as well, and they need to be involved in decision making. The fourth is that we know that discrimination is still going on, and we will hear that in our sessions tomorrow, whether we're talking about employment or small business development or housing. We see it everywhere, and we still have to, again, intentionally tackle discrimination. The fifth principle is that we need data. There isn't enough data for us to really make our case, and we want more collection of data, particularly for Native Americans and for Asian Americans. Those two groups, it's really hard to tease it out, and we need to have that in order to make our case. And the sixth is that simply individual-based remedies don't work for our communities. Our fates are closely tied with other people in our communities, so that we need things that are community-wide initiatives. And last, we need comprehensive, holistic human capacity agenda, because we know that all of the issues are very closely connected. So, for example, if our children are not doing that well in school, we can't only look at the school system, because if a child is coming to school hungry in the morning, or if they've got an abscess in their tooth, they're not going to learn. So we need to make sure that we put all of these things together. So I'm just going to give you a quick 2-minute version of our 2-day conference to prepare you a little bit. But today, the first day, is really more for ourselves, and it's really going to aim to prepare us for tomorrow to talk with the policymakers, to put us in the mindset that we would like to be in. Our first panel is going to be on seismic shifts. It's almost like since our last convening in 2007 that we got in our spaceship and we went through a time warp, and all of a sudden here we are and we're looking around like, whoa, what is changed and what is still the same, and what are we going to do in this new environment? So we have some folks in the room who are going to start us off with some big and bold new ideas. As President Obama says, it's time for big ideas and bold action, and that's what we're going to hear from that group. And then later in the afternoon, we're going to hear about the work on the ground. So we're going to go from like a mile up to what's going on at the ground and what we're doing, building on community strengths to improve the economic status of the people in our communities. And then from that, too, what do we need to make those successes the rule and not the exception to the rule? Because we have these wonderful projects that are going on in little pockets. How can we make those grow and flourish? And we're also going to talk about messaging, because in this different time, we need to talk about things in a different way to draw in all the allies that we can get in order to solve the problem of the race gap within a generation. So, we're coming here in a slightly different stance than maybe we have in other times. So, for example, we're not coming here as supplicants. We're not coming here saying, please, please, please help us. We're not doing that. We're also not coming here as militants. We're not saying, we're holding you accountable and you got to do this and this and this and this. Although both of those could be appropriate at some time. But we are really here to engage with the policymakers and the Obama administration to say, we are here as resources for you. How can we work together to really make this economy one that works for all of us? Now, President Obama has said recently that he wants to see the restoration of science as a basis for some of our decision making. And science has told us that melatonin is not the genetic determinant of intelligence, talent, capacity, or character. So if you have a car that's painted white and one that's painted any other color, the color of the paint isn't going to tell you what's underneath the hood. So if our nation continues using the unscientific method of preferring any white car to the better ones that are idling over in the lot, our economy will remain stuck in reverse. So let's spend our time and really, let folks know that our cars are ready to go and we will be available to take this economy into the 21st century. Thank you very much.